Well, good evening, and thank you all for coming here. This is really neat. It's a great crowd for a really different kind of presentation, and I'm really excited because I know Daniel. You guys know where Daniel Peter is? India. Daniel's in India. So Daniel and Cynthia reached out to me and asked if I would facilitate this evening. Because we didn't just want to put a bunch of people up here to talk and have you bombard them with questions. We actually wanted somebody to crack a whip. And I'm really good at cracking a whip. So what we have tonight is a little different. We have 6 panelists. They are all veterans and have been in the Salesforce ecosystem in various positions for quite a number of years. I like to say they represent people who've been over the mountaintop and can tell you where the landmines are and the quicksand and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to ask them, they know who they are, I'm going to ask them to please take a seat. Come on up here and organize yourselves any way you would like. Now, I'm not going to introduce them in detail. I will tell you their names and hopefully pronounce them all correctly, or they won't buy me a beer later. But I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to explain how the evening is going to work, because we have a structure to this evening. And basically what we're going to do, what time is it? Who knows Adam, what time is it?
7:08.
7:08, good. So we're actually going to start rolling in just a couple of minutes, and for about an hour, we are going to have them tell us stuff. And I'm going to tell you what kind of stuff they're going to tell us. We're going to break that hour into roughly 4 15-minute chunks, because we want them to tell us a lot of stuff, as much as possible. We want to share with as many people as possible, and we want to be able to answer the questions of the people in the room as much as possible. The problem is, with the size of the audience and the size of the panel, if we just started to do arbitrary Q&A, we would never really get through their stories. So we're going to try and do it really structured. What I want to encourage you to do is, as they are talking, and I'll tell you what they're going to talk about in a minute, if you have a question, please tweet it. All right? So you're going to tweet it. That way we capture it with a hashtag for our group, BASFDUG, and I'll let you figure out what that means. If it's a specific question to one of them, you can also include the handle of the individual. If it's a general question, feel free. But that way we've captured it. We actually have a, I think we have I'm going to let Cynthia, can you turn the Twitter feed visible? So we'll have the Twitter feed filtered for the hashtag, and you'll see your questions going by, hopefully. But here's how we're going to do this. For the first hour, we're going to work, we've got 4 chunks to go through, and I'll tell you what they are in a minute. Then we're going to break, probably around 8:15. We'll do a quick bio break, and then I'm going to have these 6 wonderful folk pair up, and I'm going to let them decide who they're going to pair up with and fight that out. And we're going to disperse them across the room into 3 general chunks, maybe one over there, one over there, one over there. And people can just go up and ask them and just do ad hoc QA. That way you can make sure to sort of shove your way in and get your question asked. We want to make sure that everybody has a good chance to get their questions asked and answered, all right? So here's what we're going to do. But to make sure you don't forget your question, tweet it. That way we've got it, all right? Here's what we're going to do. The first chunk, which will be about 7:15, we're going to start and we're going to let these people introduce themselves. And we're going to ask them to share a brief, about 2 minutes, brief personal developer journey. You know, where you come from, how you got into Salesforce, etc. After that, we're going to do a block talking about lightning transition. Lightning transition is, and has been, and will be a very hot topic. So what we'd like to do is have them share their migration or adoption experience stories. Now that could be a triumph or a catastrophe, either or both, and what advice you might have for the group. The third chunk, which we hope to start up at around 7:45, is going to focus on equality in the workplace. Again, if you have any stories, triumphs, and maybe some catastrophes, and again, advice for the group. And then the last chunk, probably around 8 o'clock, advice for transitioning into Salesforce development, whether you're coming from an admin non-coder type role, or perhaps coming from a development role, but on a different platform. And again, sharing your own personal stories and advice, all right? We won't do Q&A while they're telling their stories, right? So I encourage you, if a question comes to mind, please capture it, and that way we can get to it afterwards. All right, does that make sense? All right, we're all good? Good. Oh my goodness, applause. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to go just down from the beginning. I'm going to give Bonnie the mic. Bonnie, please introduce yourself. First, what I'd like to do is have everybody introduce themselves, just their name, who they are, whatever, and then we'll come back around and we'll ask you to share your developer story, okay?
My name is Bonny Hinners. I am an independent consultant and here in the Bay Area. I also have a full-time job with a very large company that doesn't give me permission on short-term to speak because they're a very large company and have a marketing department and a legal department that have to approve everything that gets said, right? So luckily I'm an independent consultant as well.
My name's Adam Rutland, and
You can hold it a little bit closer to your mouth.
my name's Adam Rutland, and I'm an Apex developer for an ISV in Salesforce called Vlocity, and we make customer relationship management software for specific industries.
Hello, everyone. My name is Goksun Ilhan, and I'm a senior development manager at Trailhead engineering team here at Salesforce.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Grabill. I am a lead engineer at Salesforce. I work on the developer experience platform, but I've worked on a bunch of other teams on other parts of the platforms, like working on custom objects, custom fields, globalization, multi-currency, Lightning platform, and most recently, custom metadata types.
Hi, I'm Chris Peterson. I am the product manager for Apex and Platform Cache.
Hi, I'm Adam Olshansky. I also work for, I guess, an unnamed large company whose marketing department I did not think to ask if it was okay to speak.
Great. Thank you all. All right, so now, Bonnie, here is your prompt. Would you please share a brief, is that mic on? Oops, sorry, hang on a minute. We want to make sure we use the mics because we are capturing this on video, and this is where he's getting the audio. Okay. Would you please share a brief personal developer journey? Where did you come from? And what got you into Salesforce? And along the way, if you would also identify how did Salesforce community impact that journey? And when I say community, it's not just community, the people community, but also the mechanisms. I mean, Trailhead has only been around for a few years, and maybe you predate Trailhead. Maybe you dated Trailhead, did you? Anyway, things like Ohana, developer user groups, conferences, etc. What impact did those aspects of what I'll call the Salesforce Ohana have on your developer journey? And I'm going to ask you all to pretty much address those as well.
Awesome. Well, I started programming at Radio Shack on a TRS-80 because it was there and it was available and I could. And then majored in computer science and went on to be a programmer for Linear Business Products, which became Harris Business Products, and Autodesk, and a number of other companies that you've probably never heard of. And then took time off to have kids and raise them for a few years and be an at-home mom. And when I wanted to get back into it, I heard about this company called Salesforce and was told that it was going to be a really hot commodity. It was easier to get into nonprofits, I found, than for-profits when you've taken 12 years off to raise kids. So I was working for a nonprofit, got them the free donation of Salesforce, and went to the very first Salesforce developer conference, which was not Trailhead, I am sorry to say, or Trailhead DX. It was in San Jose in 2007, maybe? Yeah, it was a long time ago. We got flip cameras. Remember those? They don't even exist anymore. It was an awesome, fun conference. I was inspired to do Adobe Flex and Apex and Visualforce and started developing awesome stuff. It's been great.
Oh, so what, going to that conference sounds like it was a tipping point of some kind. Just if you could speak to, as you came into Salesforce, what was it, was there anything that helped you transition into Salesforce, support your transition from what was early Ohana in those days, right?
Absolutely. So Salesforce has had this attitude of helping the community help itself and being available for the community, I think, since day one, probably. So yes, I went to that conference. It was full of fabulous information about how to get started in these new languages on this brand new platform that they were just introducing. And it was inspiring and gave me a lot of creative ideas to go forth in the nonprofit world and create solutions for them. And Salesforce is so supportive of us helping each other. It sounds silly, but it's really awesome. They give us the tools of Trailhead now. They give us these conferences with these sessions that are marvelous. And one 15-minute session I went to at a previous Dreamforce, people were leaving going, oh, that changed my life. So really, there's a lot out there to get you going and get you on the right track, and a lot of encouragement for that from Salesforce in the community to give back.
Great. Well, thank you. Before we, you can hand it to him. I'm not going to take it away from him. I just want to do a quick straw poll. How many of you are here for the first time? Okay. How many in the room, that was about 30%, how many in the room are brand new to Salesforce? Not as many. Okay, good. Okay, good. How many of you identify with the admin role? How many of you identify with the developer role? How many of you identify with architect role? A couple. How many of you identify just as a customer? Ha, okay. Adam, please take it away. Your personal journey and how early Ohana or later Ohana helped you along the way.
So I kind of started programming. I did not go to school for a CS degree. I'm a self-taught engineer. And I started about 11 years ago kind of building iOS apps. It's kind of right before the boot camp kind of wave started. And so I was building games and kind of parlayed that into working at Zynga as a mobile games developer. And that was a lot of fun. I did that for about 2 years. And then this company that I work for now started, and I was lucky to know someone who was working there and join. And I think the thing that I've learned as kind of a self-taught engineer is to kind of focus on the dirtier kind of problems that not everyone wants to do. That's kind of how I've been able to be successful as an engineer. So I really initially started doing the version control and build management to support a number of engineers who were building the CRM software, and then moved into doing features myself. And so I've always kind of just tried to learn the platform and the different things. And if you've used Ant at all, it's not always the easiest thing. Luckily, the Salesforce Foundation had this Cumulus project, which was really interesting and kind of was the baseline for what we were doing. But even that was kind of well beyond what a new company wanted. So I had to go in and kind of build scripts and build tools, and that led me to then building myself an ETL tool that exists inside Salesforce. That's one of the kind of core products in our company, because I kind of knew the Salesforce data model and was able to kind of parlay that into building these business process tools that my company builds. So my personal journey has primarily been around just like learning the nitty-gritty problems in Salesforce and trying to come up with novel ways to solve them.
Well, that begs a question. How did you learn it other than just sort of digging in?
At the time, Trailhead did not exist. I've been doing Salesforce development now for 4 years. But there is such a huge community out there, which was very, very helpful. The Cumulus project is an open source project for Salesforce build, and that was amazing. There was a lot of different presentations that were done at Dreamforce by the creator, Andy Fawcett, and kind of these different things that allowed me to do about 6 months of work in the first week that I was working at the company.
Great. Thank you. Let's pass it on. Goksun.
All right. I guess my story.
Can you hold the mic up just a little bit more?
Oh, a little bit? Okay,
That's
sure.
good.
I guess there may be some people in the room who can relate to my story. I call it the usual software engineer immigrant story that happens, like ends up in Bay Area. I'm originally from Turkey. I went to school for computer engineering, and during 2000, 2001 time frame when everything was so hot, you would just go look for a job and get a job by, like by midday. So I got a job in United States of America, and I decided to move to California. And everything was going great. I was a software engineer for a startup, consulting with a couple of companies, and then everything went and crashed. So, I don't know if anybody else is here on a work visa, but that's a really stressful time for a lot of people because there were no jobs available. So I used that opportunity to go back to school and finish my master's degree. And then when I got out, the market got better. So I got a job as a web developer in a mid-sized company. That was when I first met with the Salesforce platform, because we were working on the website and integrating with Salesforce. And then the other thing that really changed my mind, my experience is one of the developers who was supposed to go to Dreamforce quit his job. So I was offered to go and in his place. And that was literally the journey that kind of like changed, and by just looking at the sheer amount of people and the inspiration it gave me to move on and do things. And at that point, I knew that I eventually wanted to end up working for Salesforce. And then after working at this previous company a couple of years, I switched to becoming an engineering manager, switched from being a programmer to a manager position. And then, when it was time to move on, I worked and I tried really, really, really hard to get into Salesforce. It wasn't easy, but I eventually, got in. And I work with events technology team, which actually does the technology behind events, including Dreamforce. So it was like the hashtag dream job for me. And I worked there for a couple of years. Actually, one of my previous teammates here, hi to Andy. And then I recently switched to the best team in the world, Team Trailhead. Like when I was learning all this stuff, we didn't have Trailhead, and now we do. And what makes me get up every day and come to work and be really inspired is, I was just telling somebody right before this, it's the passion of people, the passion of the people on the team, and how they really care about the community and the people, and being a multiplier, and enabling people to move on with their own journeys.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. So when I was growing up, I always knew I wanted to work in computers, even though I didn't really know what that meant at the time. So I went to college and got a computer science degree. And when you're in college doing a computer science degree, you need technical internships. So I found a company in San Francisco. It was like a medium-sized startup that needed an intern, and I had 2 internships there. One, I was just working on their website, but the summer afterward, they had just lost their one Apex developer, and it just happened to be in late spring, and so they needed someone to fill in temporarily while they hired a new full-time Apex developer, and it happened to be summertime, and they were like, oh, Carolyn knows how to code. We can bring her on and she can be our temporary Apex developer. So that was my introduction to Salesforce, was as an intern thrust into the world of Apex. But I really enjoyed that. Like, as I was working more and more on that system, I was like, oh, this Apex thing is really cool. I should go work at Salesforce when I graduate. And I was really fortunate to be able to go to the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, which is a great platform for getting hired if you're a woman with a CS degree. Or if you're not a woman in CS degree. You know what I mean. It worked out. So I joined Salesforce that way through Grace Hopper Celebration. And let's see, in terms of Ohana, being on top of the Salesforce platform is more about, for me, understanding how admins work day to day, because like I don't know what it's like on the admin side, but internally it's like, oh, I'm developing these features and there's a wall between me and the people who are actually using them. So for me, it's about breaking that wall and going out and meeting admins in the real world. So I've been really fortunate to be able to do some volunteering time working one-on-one with admins in Girls Inc. of Alameda. I had the chance to go work with them on a data migration project when I was still pretty new to the company. Just didn't really know what I was doing. If we had Trailhead, it would have been a lot easier. But we figured it out together and we got stuff done. And the kind of thing that keeps me going now is like helping on the developer forums and helping on like the Salesforce Stack Exchange. It's really motivating to see like, oh, people need help. I have access to under the hood. I can go see what your error messages mean. Like I can help you with that. And that's what I really enjoy about this community.
Cool. Thank you. Chris.
So my story's a little bit like Adam's in that I'm not classically trained as a programmer. I actually dropped out of community college to be a Unix admin. Found that I was learning faster there and decided, why not? Let's go with it. And then I took a job that, in hindsight, was a really poor decision. And to get out of that position, I took the next available job, which was, hey, you want to go write some IT service management software on this newfangled Salesforce thing? And this was API version 16, right as Visualforce launched. So like day one that Salesforce was a platform you could build IT service management apps on. So I inherited a code base of a guy who went to Apereo and left it without any notes. And my background was shell scripting, Perl, Python. And we were in the Salesforce incubator space, and I will never forget printing out the entire Apex developer guide on a printer that Salesforce owned and flipping through it as I walked through the hallways to figure out what I was going to do with this ungodly mess that had been handed to me. That company ended up getting acquired. We built an actual App Exchange app and got listed and certified with ITIL compliance and all sorts of fun things like that. And then the CEO and CFO got in some legal trouble and the company ran out of money. And I took the next interesting Apex development job I found, which happened to be Financial Force. That company, much more fun, much less legal trouble. Ended up working there for 4 years. I started out my first year there taking basically all of the technical support escalations because most of their development team was in the UK and Spain at the time. And so I just got a smattering of everything that could go wrong with Salesforce in every possible capacity. Just direct IV of that for a year straight. And then moved on to being an architect on their professional service platform before I joined Salesforce as a lead engineer on the App Exchange site, which, fun fact, is Apex. And then about 6 months ago, I took over as Apex PM. So that was about 10 years of Apex before I decided I was tired of the things I didn't like about Apex, and I was going to go fix them.
So it's fair to say you've been around.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
And when you ask about Ohana, I think of the original Apex PM, a man named Andrew Waite, who just celebrated 15 years with Salesforce. And I will never forget the time that I hunted him down at Dreamforce with the world's weirdest bug report, and he ended up getting it fixed for me by the end of the week. Something that just I couldn't even explain to support, and within minutes he got it and fixed it. And from that moment, I had a lot of fun interacting with the community. I regularly used to go heckle our now EVP of kernel engineering, Stephen Tam, at Meet the Developers. And now that he works down the hall from me, he gets me back. So it's all come full circle, and it's the best.
Thank you. Sorry, Adam, we're out of time. We're going to go. No, I'm sorry. So I'm going to give you a little extra time. So I'm going to set this for about a little over 2 minutes.
All right, I'll try to be brief. So I started in the Salesforce ecosystem in 2014. I was working doing some as a systems analyst doing SAP stuff, which was not a lot of fun, not very user-friendly, very, very difficult to kind of learn how to use it. And at some point, at the same time, I was actually attending a grad school program in software engineering. I originally started out college wanting to be a political science major, ended up kind of falling into engineering, learning how to code in college, finding I really liked it. And in this SAP systems analysis role, I wasn't really doing anything hands-on or with coding. And so one of the courses I took in college was my grad school program was on cloud computing, and they had some guest speakers coming to speak with us. One of them was from Salesforce. Some of you may know a guy named Adam Seligman came to talk to us, was a senior VP at Salesforce at the time. It was very nice, came and talked to us, and at the same time, I had just gotten a promotion to work on a new team that was going to be working with two products, one called Sitecore, which is like a web-based management documentation repository, and the other one was Salesforce. And all I knew about Salesforce was that it was a CRM company. I didn't know what CRM was, but I knew that's what Salesforce did. And they were trying to figure out if they should send me to Dreamforce or to, I forget what the whatever the SAP equivalent conference is. Yeah. And I remember going online and reading about Dreamforce. I'd never heard of it before, and I saw they had a bunch of really cool speakers coming. Bruno Mars was putting on a concert, and I was like, all right, this kind of sounds a little more interesting than whatever SAP's doing. And so I eventually ended up getting to go there, and I was just kind of blown away by everything. And I was having a lot of fun, though. I took some hands-on training, a point-and-click development training, which kind of blew my mind. How do you develop things with just a bunch of mouse clicks? But I took it, and I really enjoyed it. I took another hands-on training on Intro to Apex, and I'd done some SQL in a previous internship, and then I'd done some Java development in college, so I was able to pick up Apex and SQL pretty easily. I really enjoyed that. I attended a theater session by a guy named David Liu, who some of you may know. He was a self-taught, previously an email spammer, self-taught Apex developer who was working at Google. And I was like, Google, that sounds kind of cool. If this guy was an email spammer and got all the way up there, I wonder if I could do something similar. And he had a website talking about how to get Salesforce certified, and I really kind of took to that. And I went up to him afterward, and I said, hey, thanks a lot. And he said, yeah, sure thing. Check out the website, and if it's working for you, let me know. I'd be happy to hear how you're doing. And I attended, the last session I attended at Dreamforce was a Q&A with Mark and Parker, and they had a section of the MVPs, and they ended up going over to talk to them, and they were all super excited and super into it. And I was like, that's really amazing. There's a group of people that's like really super into this software platform. And so I just thought that was kind of cool. And I kind of spent my nights and weekends after that learning Salesforce. At the time, going through the Salesforce University online curriculum. I think Trailhead had just been released then. I didn't know about it for a few months. But I ended up learning all I could about Salesforce, getting a bunch of certifications. I attended a local user group meeting. It was kind of one of my first experiences with the Ohana in Phoenix, Arizona. And that went really well. There was an MVP named Eric Dreschfield who came to visit. And so I was like, all right, I saw these MVPs at Dreamforce. Let me meet one of them and talk to them a little bit. And I told him I was potentially interested in the MVP program. And he set me up with another guy from Philadelphia named Javen Aurora. And he kind of was really inspirational to me, helped me along the path of becoming a Salesforce MVP. He encouraged me to present at Dreamforce, so I submitted a session thinking, what do I know? I just started with this a few months ago, but I got accepted to speak at only my second Dreamforce, which was pretty exciting. Adam Seligman, who I mentioned earlier, I went up at Dreamforce to talk to him just to kind of say hi. Oh, hey, I was in this class. And he's like, oh, hey, great to see you. Let me know if you do well. Feel free to tweet about it, and we'd be happy to share it. And I was kind of taken aback by I'm this nobody. Who am I tweeting about Salesforce? And some senior VP is talking about sharing it with people. So that was kind of another kind of something that clicked to me. Like, oh, this is, everybody's really welcoming. Everybody's really nice. And I remember when I got a bunch of the certifications, I contacted David Liu again. And he, I just to kind of thank him for all of his work and all the stuff he put together. And he was like, oh, that's amazing. Do you mind if I post about you on my blog? And him posting about me on his blog ended up getting me connected with a lot of people on LinkedIn. One of them reached out to me and said, hey, I'm looking to get certified. Can you help me out? And I spent a couple hours with this guy I'd never met before on the phone, helping quiz him on Apex. And he eventually got a Salesforce admin certification. And a couple months later, I started applying for jobs in the Bay Area. And the same guy reached out to me again and was like, hey, I found this job. It's a little too advanced for me, but you might be interested in it potentially. and it was with a company called SolarCity that recently got bought by Tesla. But I ended up interviewing with them and getting the job and kind of moving out here really quickly. And I had about 2-3 weeks to find a house in San Francisco. And after getting not responded to on 10 different Craigslist posts, I reached out to this guy again and was like, hey, I'm moving here in a week. Do you happen to know anyone who's looking for a place? And sure enough, he did. He set me up with some guy that he knew. And I've been that guy's roommate for 3 years now. So, yeah, so it definitely kind of every time I've reached out and tried to help people and give back to all those who have helped me, I've found success. I started getting Trailhead badges and tweeting about them, and sure enough, people started sharing them, and I got named Salesforce MVP a year or two ago now, and so it's kind of this, just continuous cycle of helping people, having them help you, and it's just been really great to be a part of.
The power of Ohana. Pre-Ohana or later Ohana. Great. Well, that is round one. We're going to go loop, iterate, or iteration, whatever you want to call it. So this time, let's talk some tech. Let's talk about lightning transitions. And if you could share something, if you have anything, you can always pass if you don't have anything. What you can share about any migration or adoption experience stories, and what advice you might provide to anybody listening.
Do it. Do it is my advice. Do it. Just do it. We are transitioning 700 plus users currently, probably closer to 900 users now because we're wrapping 200 users from a different system. But anyway, that's another story. It's totally worth it. It's the way of the future. The new features are going to be Lightning-based, Lightning user experience features. So do it, but do it with thought. So all of those Visualforce pages, you can just tweak them and make them look more Lightning-like. That's a good start, but you can also start talking to your users about how to give them a better experience, because it's a great opportunity to make their whole experience more oriented to their specific tasks rather than accounts are here, contacts are here. They go together because you click there and then you click over there. That's not even necessary anymore. So do it. That's my advice.
So I'm going to kind of just answer a totally different question a little bit, but maybe with the word migration somewhere in there. So I think it's a similar kind of I would like to say the same thing as you were saying. You should do it. And I think that this idea of moving towards these best practices that Salesforce is kind of pushing with Salesforce DX and Lightning, and moving away from what might not have been the most logical way to sometimes set up a project, where you're stuffing a whole bunch of JavaScript into a single page or compiling it into a static resource or whatever you might do. I think learning these new best practices with version control driven development and everything is the best way to kind of move forward with Salesforce and to keep your skills kind of in the forefront of what most technology companies are doing when you're implementing kind of software. Because I think one of the things that gets lost sometimes is that you are building software on Salesforce. Not everything is kind of point and click. So it's really important to follow the best practices in software development.
Thank you.
Sure, I know. That's so enthusiastic. Unfortunately, I don't have a direct migration story, but I'm just going to agree with the rest of the panelists and say do it. In my previous team, we used Salesforce Classic because of the reasons that didn't really fully migrate to Lightning, and we are working on a project right now, and which is on Lightning, and I can see the difference, and I think it just definitely provides the latest and the greatest from Salesforce, and if you want to take advantage of all that great functionalities and features that are available. It may be difficult, but, make the decision and move forward is all I can say, I guess. Thank you.
Let's see. So I have a couple thoughts from like an individual user of Salesforce perspective, and then a thought as a developer on top of the Salesforce platform. As an individual user of Salesforce, I've been working in Lightning full time for at least 2 years, maybe more like. I was on the Lightning platform for most of that time, so it was kind of expected. But the thing that helps me the most is console apps. You know how when you make an app, you could say like either this uses normal routing or console. And console is so much better. I know, right? Because you can have tabs at the top of it. And a lot of things that I used to use like Chrome plugins for, I find myself doing in Lightning now. Like with console view with split pane, I can have a list view of like the bug tickets that I'm working on one side, and on the other side, like open them up and have them in tabs. And it's things that I would have done in Chrome, now I can do directly within Salesforce. And I think that does help me speed along my process a little bit. As a developer, what I'm most excited about for developing on top of Lightning is being able to make components that are not closely tied to the purpose that they're serving. So like with Lightning Data Service, you can write components that don't have to know what kind of data they're going to operate on at the time that you're developing it. I feel like as a developer on Salesforce, that's been my focus. Like I like working on the things where it's like, oh, this is so generic, you can work on it with anything. That's true of custom metadata types. That's true of Lightning Data Service. I'm going to give a shameless plug. If you find the last Salesforce developer user group recording where I spoke about Lightning Data Service, one of the things I was focusing on was writing components that are kind of object agnostic. So as a developer, if that's going to get you to go to Lightning, go for it.
So I joined Salesforce at an interesting time. I didn't have too much opportunity to use Lightning before I joined Salesforce. And then the Lightning I developed was actually in the Salesforce platform, like the core application, rather than using the same tools that everybody else in this room would use. So I have a bit of an odd tale, but bear with me for a second. My team was building a number of Lightning components for the App Exchange. It's actually integrated into the App Launcher and Lightning Experience. So that was actually built before I joined Salesforce. But I joined Salesforce and got assigned the task of migrating to the new user interaction tracking system that was built internally for the platform that we were migrating away from the old one that tracked visual force clicks and things like that. And the very first thing I did was realize that all I have to do is add a couple of tags for these locator components, and everything just happens. Somebody had built a framework to make all of the boring boilerplate for user tracking just go away. And I would just declaratively say, when somebody clicks on this, it means this. That's it. And checking in that code where the whole thing was instrumented for user activity tracking with a diff of like 50 lines of XML and no code, really kind of opened my eyes to what powerful frameworks there are and what the potential for the future is. So Lightning Data Service came out not long after that, and seeing how that shared cacheability between different components on the page to avoid excessive round trips really was that same type of, you can really build services that tie everything together coming out for customers in the same way we had started seeing it internally. And then realizing that the roadmap for Lightning Data Services, when I attended Carolyn's session actually, and found out from her that the roadmap was basically everything I was going to complain about was on there. And nobody has to reinvent the wheel anymore. It's just going to do these 18 things. So it's the power of the frameworks that it lets you build, the code reuse, the shared services, is really where you start to see the snowballing of value. And I'll also take this moment to pitch that Apex works just the same in Lightning as Visualforce, so 100% of your Apex will work just great.
All right, just a quick poll. How many people here are not on Lightning yet? All right, not too many. So for those of you that aren't, shameless plug, I have a Pluralsight course on migrating to Lightning. It's at bit.ly/lightning migration. But YouTube's fully on Lightning, and I think I'm able to say that because we presented it at Dreamforce last year. But for me, the biggest thing about going to Lightning, two biggest things actually. One, I was just kind of reminded about my parents were in town this past weekend, and my mom was telling me how excited she was. They just upgraded to Windows 10, and they only have a couple of sites they're still going to Internet Explorer to use. And it just kind of reminded me that, okay, I need to, continue introducing them to Google Chrome and making sure they're using the latest and greatest technology. And that's kind of how I think about Lightning versus Classic, right? Classic is there, it still works, and it's fine. But if you want the latest and greatest and keeping up with what Salesforce is doing, you really need to be in Lightning to do that. Like Chris mentioned, Apex works the same. Like Carolyn mentioned, Lightning components are great and easy to use. And so I highly recommend upgrading if you haven't already. I rarely switch back to Classic now. I really enjoy using the object manager personally when I'm trying to find different fields on different objects as opposed to 5 different clicks to get to whatever object I was trying to find before. Much, much easier to do. So I'm definitely very happy in Lightning and highly recommend switching over.
Great, thank you. All right, that's the end of round 2. Let's move on to round 3. Round 3, equality in the workplace. Any stories that you can share, maybe triumphs and or catastrophes, and advice to the group.
There are multiple paths to the same destination. That's my advice. So when you find yourself on the steepest hill, keep at it and keep trying because it's going to be worth the climb.
I would just say that the biggest benefit that's kind of obvious of equality is just getting different kind of viewpoints in the workplace especially. It's great to work with people all over the world at my company, and you get to learn a lot about different people and the way people think, and I think that will always make you better at your own job, and I think that's probably the biggest benefit of equality that I've experienced.
I don't know. I have a lot of stories, I guess, too. But one thing I can say is when I look at, especially being a female in a tech field, it doesn't seem to be, at least it's getting better right now, but it didn't seem to be like a very 50-50% kind of percentage back in the day, which is interesting because in Turkey, my graduating class was 52% female. And it was a very common thing. It was really, not a big deal having that, being female in technology. But coming to US, I think one thing I noticed that it is more visible. So, taking some women in technology and leadership classes, I realized that when you hire, or at least like in your family or around you in your community, encourage people who are not like you. Do not try to hire people that you feel very comfortable with. Of course, we need a work environment where all we can be happy and work in harmony. But different people with different backgrounds bring different perspectives and different ideas. Encourage minorities, encourage females in technology. And one interesting article I recently read, actually I read about it a while ago and I forgot, and I was checking the percentages today. Women have to feel 100% qualified for a job for them to apply, versus where a man just only needs to feel 60% qualified for a job to apply. So my advice is I felt supported a majority of my career by incredible people, incredible mentors and managers, and work with some people who are not that incredible, which also taught me a lot of great things. Encourage people, encourage diversity, encourage females in technology, I guess. Thank you.
Equality, the way that Salesforce talks about it, has 2 pieces. One is diversity, and I think most people understand what diversity means. But the other part is inclusion. And inclusion is, if not, I think it's more important than diversity. You can't have diversity in the workplace without inclusion. And inclusion means a lot of surprising things, or it means a lot of little subtle things. It means when you're going to have a meeting and one person is remote, then you need to speak into the microphone. That person needs to be able to hear. And sometimes you need to go out of your way to include somebody. And I've been thinking about this recently because there's a Trailhead on it that I just took. There's a bunch. What are you laughing at me for plugging Trailhead?
You should plug in Trailhead.
I'm plugging Trailhead.
I should plug in Trailhead more.
We have Trailheads about equality, and I think that's awesome. Like, what other companies' training videos have training about equality and that kind of thing? I'm really happy about that. But inclusion. I've also been thinking about this because June is Pride Month in San Francisco, and this past weekend was the Pride Parade. And if you're going to have real representation, or representation at a level that exists in your community, if you've got, if you're including a minority in your workplace, then that minority, if they're going to be included, the onus is on the rest of the company, the majority, to include them. So if diversity is a goal for you in your workplace, focus on diversity, but even more so, focus on inclusion. And go look at our Trailheads and learn more about what that means in ways that I've fumbled my words with.
So as a member of effectively every majority group when it comes to programmers, I feel like I'm not the most qualified person to talk on this topic. But I will say that in my career, it's been a consistent indicator of both company and team health that if there is no real diversity, or at least inclusive outreach on a team, that there's generally a large cultural problem. The teams that I've seen that are monolithic in their makeup are generally teams that I see people fleeing for whatever reason, whether it's interpersonal conflict or just harshness that is unwarranted. And to me, it's become a very key indicator of cultural health, team health, and how well ideas and norms can be challenged, which is fairly important for getting anything that's interesting done. So I don't know that I'm the most qualified to talk about how to do it, but I can say it's incredibly important, and keep your eyes peeled. You'll notice a lot of very subtle signs if you start looking, and try and be supportive of efforts to normalize inclusivity.
Right. Yeah, like Chris, I'm probably also not very qualified to speak about it, but I do have two kind of stories. So I used to host a podcast with a guy named Hamza, and so I'm a white Jewish guy living in the U.S. He's a black Muslim guy living in London from Somalia originally. And so we were kind of talking about, we're both Salesforce developers, so we have a lot in common and a lot of differences also. And we were talking about a year or two ago around the time Pokemon Go came out, and we were bonding over how much fun it was to, go out and hunt for Pokemon all around the city. And, for me, I wasn't really thinking about it at all. Oh, there's a Pokemon over there, I'll go get it. But for him being a black Muslim guy, he said he definitely had a very different opinion on maybe where and when he should be going out looking for Pokemon based on other people's perceptions. And it was just kind of something that I hadn't thought twice about, like, oh, there's a Pokemon over there, I'll go catch it. But it definitely kind of, resonated with me. This is obviously something that needs to be thought about, and I probably wouldn't be the one to think about it. The other one was I was at Dreamforce a couple years ago, and Melinda Gates was giving a talk about how when the Apple Health app came out, there was nothing on there about menstrual cycles. And again, me being a white male, I wouldn't think twice about that necessarily, but I would probably bet money of all the developers developing the health app, I'm guessing that none of them were female, or if they were, they weren't included in being able to speak up, because I'm guessing that's something that a female developer is not going to forget about. And so, but again, for me, it kind of hammered the point home that not only is kind of diversity and inclusion the right things to be thinking about, but it's the smart things to be thinking about. Because if you are putting one single set of, like I said, monolithic ideas into your product, you're already behind the 8 ball because you're not marketing to everybody. You're already making just by nature, you're not giving yourself the biggest audience possible to use your application. So I think that's important to note. It's obviously the right thing to do, and I'm very fortunate to work for a company that strives to promote equality, but it's also the smart thing to do.
Fantastic. Made me think of a formula. Diversity plus inclusion equals innovation squared. Just, wow. Great. Let me pass this over here. All right. We are on the last formal round.
Before you start, I'm going to give you 2 fun facts.
Oh,
I went to school with Melinda Gates, and we were in the same computer science classes. And at that time, my university, mine and Melinda's, had the most women graduating with a computer science degree in their entire history, because when I got back into computer science and realized that the women were gone, I went, what happened? Well, Melinda went and had kids, and I went and had kids, and we didn't do it anymore. And within 4 years of Melinda and I graduating, there were 0 women graduating with a computer science degree from my university that had almost 50% when I graduated. Went to 0 in 4 years. Now, it wasn't just my university, it was every university in the country. There was a sudden drop. Nobody has finally identified the cause, but it may be
year?
related to home computers.
what year?
Well, home gaming systems.
was the
That
per-
would have been around 1990 that they were down to 0. And they had a really, really hard time getting the numbers back up.
Maybe also these are kids of baby boomers, or that were at the timing.
The women I knew in computer science classes couldn't wait to get into the business world and apply what they were learning in computer science to improve business processes. That's what they wanted to do. And over that 4 years, computer gaming at-home game systems became hugely popular. Universities started creating more video types of programs, which are awesome. And there's a lot of women that are really into that, so don't get me wrong. But I think that there was a shift in people's perceptions, in students' perceptions, in high school's perceptions of how to present computer information.
Great point.
Sorry, what university did you go to?
I went to Duke University.
Duke? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's quickly do the last round, because I know people have lots of questions, and I know they're going to want to storm you when I release you. The last round is on advice for transitioning into Salesforce development, whether from an admin non-coder role or perhaps breaking into Salesforce development from coming from some other platform. What can you share? What can you share about how Ohana, might be a part of that, etc.? And we'll start with you, Bonnie.
So I think transitioning into Salesforce as a developer is awesome, because I'm actually now transitioning into MuleSoft as a developer. And that is painful, because I'm working with a developer who, when he shares his app, I can't build it because he's got stuff on his computer that I don't have on my computer. And yes, we're using Maven, which is supposed to manage the builds for us. But no, he didn't set his up right. So I can't run his stuff. Or maybe mine's not set up right, because, it depends on who you ask, right? So, sorry? Use Valence. Thank you. I will look into that. You don't have that problem at all with Salesforce, because you develop it in Salesforce, you develop your Apex, you develop your Lightning components. Okay, yes, you can also use SFDX, and you can use VS Code and all that good stuff. But you can also just do it right there in Salesforce. And it manages your build, and it supplies all your stuff. And okay, well, maybe you want to put in some JavaScript stuff into your Lightning component, but you can do that with static resources, and it's all great and easy, and you just never have these fiddly little difficulties to worry about.
Can you speak to Ohana and the support?
Absolutely. you know, there's all the great resources of Trailhead. There's all the great resources of sessions at Trailhead DX and sessions at Dreamforce and sessions at your local developer user group. There are awesome MVPs like Don and Adam, and hey, me too, that, that create courses for Pluralsight. For those of you whose companies pay for that resource, then we have tried to create a catalog of really awesome courses for you there. And there are also lots of free advice. Stack Exchange, I think somebody mentioned already. Lots of code examples. You know, I think you've, Chris, I probably have referred to old blog posts of yours in the past where you were like, hey, I solved a problem. This is how I solved it. There are a lot of developers out there who do that, who are like, hey, I discovered something cool, and they'll just post their own question on Stack Exchange with their answer. Like, here's my question and how I solved it. It's really awesome. Their answers are out there, and it's easy to find them.
Great, thank you.
So I would say that I love working in Salesforce. I came from kind of just a traditional software company before where we were building mobile apps. And then joining Salesforce development ecosystem has been kind of an eye-opening experience. The company I work for builds a managed package, and one of the things I was first tasked with was building the build tools in order to deploy all of the parts of the managed package to the org, and then going through how much of that can be automated. And I think the thing I would like to focus on in this kind of transitioning kind of topic is the idea of learn the tools and really kind of focus on not just doing the easier kind of thing that if I'm doing a 5-minute task, I can do it in 5 minutes, but sometimes it's better to learn VS Code and to go in and, Maven's Mate used to be this big thing in Sublime, and now kind of transitioning away from that, and learning SFDX and learning the different parts of Salesforce's data model and the objects and the metadata and all these different things. I think that the really interesting thing about Salesforce is that the ecosystem is just growing a crazy amount, and there's so many different types of jobs in Salesforce. I mean, I think everyone up here kind of works in a completely different space, but all on top of this enterprise software platform. So you're not always going to be an admin for some small company. If you're a Salesforce developer, sometimes you're someone like me who works in product development, or for a large enterprise company doing implementations, which are part architecture and part implementing software that someone else has built. So I think that there's still so many things to learn in Salesforce that if you focus on being really good at what you do, that there's so many opportunities. And that's, I think, really exciting because it's not always so easy to find a startup that's just gonna be incredibly successful as a programmer or developer, but these really large enterprise companies, there's so many different challenging problems that they're also working on that it's an amazing opportunity to join right now.
Here's my opportunity to plug in Trailhead. I'm on Trailhead, Team Trailhead Engineering. Obviously, I love that team. I love working with that whole group of people and how passionate they are every day. I don't know if is anybody over here who didn't hear about Trailhead. I hope not, but it is the place to go learn, you earn your badges, and then you connect with the rest of the community. There is something for anyone and everyone. A good example, I don't know if it's a good example, but I was trying to get my admin certification, and when I started, at Salesforce, we didn't have Trailhead. And I was like going around trying to figure out, should I go take a in-class, 1 week long course, which are also great. I mean, they have also value, but I just wanted something with my crazy work schedule, trying to learn new things and trying to put Dreamforce, which was coming pretty soon, preparing for it, like something that would be adjustable to my schedule, my own like pace, and also have opportunity to go look at other things and not just like read a book and trying to figure it out in my own little sandbox. So when Trailhead came, I was really excited about it. I was really happy to be learning badges, not only in admin or developer, but in other areas. There are a lot of modules about equality, cultivating equality, and then like fourth industrial revolution, a lot of wide variety of stuff that you can learn on. And we have a new program called BAM, which is become a multiplier. I just have to do a plug. You can talk to some of our team members who are here today later if you want to get more information. But actually, if you ever want to host a learning event, BAM, which is like become a multiplier and enable you to and give you the tools to be able to host an event and give back to the community and connect with them. So I think that's about it. Thank you.
I think in a lot of ways, a developer is just someone who's gotten really good at copy paste and then find and replace. Like that's a lot of what development is, oh, I need to solve a problem. Let me go find a way that someone else has solved a similar problem. I'm going to copy what they did and say thank you on Twitter because that was awesome. And then replace the parts that are different with what I need them to do and see if it works. And hey, it worked. That's awesome. I do use Trailhead a lot for that, actually, because Trailhead has a lot of examples. Like, hey, here's an entire Apex class that does X, and all I have to do is tweak these little parts, and it'll work for my use case. Yeah.
Yay, Team Trailhead.
Don, can you refresh my mind on the question?
I'm going
Because I
to-
could talk about Trailhead, but I'm starting to...
So the prompt, which is, to talk about advice for transitioning into Salesforce development, whether coming from admin non-coder role or perhaps development on some other platform. Anything, and what you use and what's great and all the above, and also how the Ohana community can support it.
So the first answer is, of course, use Trailhead. I mean, that's a no-brainer on a question like that. But following that, I'd really suggest going deep on something. I started my Apex development days by literally reading the Apex developer guide cover to cover and learned just a huge number of weird tricks that it didn't seem like were prevalent in the community. I think I was one of the first people who started using dynamic Apex heavily. And with that, I was able to write a lot of code that was reusable. We just heard about how object agnostic logic is wonderful in Lightning. And I started writing Apex shortly after Apex had support for something like that itself. And that saved just huge volumes of code and really was a key differentiator on how fast I could get things done and how many building blocks I could reuse. It also, just going deep on a specific topic, let me really go and hound the product team. I actually did have a former Apex PM literally run from me at Dreamforce one time, which is probably one of my favorite Ohana moments, is watching the Apex PM literally flee because he knew the questions I was going to ask were going to be so rough. But no joke, having that level of knowledge about anything in particular on Salesforce makes you incredibly valuable in a way that is almost irreplaceable and also selfishly is fairly lucrative. So go deep on something, become an expert on something, and then branch out from there once you have a firm anchor would be my definite suggestion.
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend it as well. The pay is obviously great, but on top of that, if you're an admin kind of thinking about it, I think to a lot of extent you're already doing a lot of development. You just don't really know it. If you're building formulas, you're probably putting in conditional statements. You're probably putting in ands and ors, and that's a lot of what development is also. If this happens, do that. Otherwise, go execute some other process. If you're building process builder things, again, Apex is very similar to process builder. Execute this thing, check this condition, otherwise execute that thing. I tell people a lot of times I think building a flow is actually a lot harder than writing Apex. But same sort of principles. You're getting, variables that you can manipulate. You can put them into collections and iterate over the collections and do a lot of that stuff. Apex development's really cool because you can also, make nice integrations. You can do a lot more complex things. Lightning component development, somebody mentioned, also a lot of fun. You can do a lot of cool things with the UI as well and move it around and make it look exactly the way you want it to and behave exactly the way you want it to. So I highly recommend looking into it from the admin perspective, and I think you'll find you're a lot farther along than you thought you were. From other development platforms, I would say, again, it's very, very similar. I was doing Java previously. Apex and Java are very, very similar. Lightning component development has a lot of JavaScript components in there. Some CSS involved as well that you can add in. Visual Force, I don't know how much Visual Force development's going on anymore, but it's very HTML, very similar to HTML. So there, I'll plug Trailhead also, a couple of good trails on that. I know there are ones that's explicitly targeted at .NET developers, helping them make the move over. So again, I think if you're looking into Salesforce development, you're probably a lot farther along than you thought you were.
Great, thank you. So this will wrap up our round robin, our four rounds. And before I continue, I just want to add sort of a closing thought that I want to put a plug in, and the plug I want to put in is for Ohana. And what Ohana means in the abstract and what Ohana means in reality. And this is a representation, I'm pointing this group of amazing individuals, but this as well is a representation of Ohana. And just want to share that I've been in technology for about 30 years and with lots of other vendors and companies. And what fascinated me about Salesforce 10 years ago and what has continued to keep me and draw me in deeper is the community that Salesforce creates and nurtures and promotes, and the people who are drawn into it who create this sort of synergistic, self-perpetuating community of experts. And what I've sort of come to believe is that the expertise about Salesforce, while certainly it's going to come from the internal to company and the awesome tools of Trailhead and everything that Salesforce puts out as tools, as well as the incredible technology, the expertise around the wisdom of using that technology lives in the Ohana. It lives in the community, and you are all potentially a big part of that. And that's a consciousness, that's a game changer. So I encourage you to think that way. And that way you can reach out to individuals, whether they work for Salesforce internally, whether they're MVPs who are off doing their other thing, or just people in the community, maybe ISVs who have a product. You can reach out to them and you will hear back from them. And that is one of the most powerful things about Salesforce that leads to success with the platform. So I just want to share that thought with you. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to break.
Don, if you don't mind, I was going to, as the representative from product up here, confirm that there are at least half a dozen people in this room who have poked endless holes in my product plans, and everything is better for that.
Right.
So, yeah, I might be good at Apex, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a huge amount of feedback that's necessary to make something that'll actually stand the test of time. And I think that's true of pretty much the entire product org at Salesforce. We definitely want to hear from you.
Yeah, and that's the community of Salesforce. That's Salesforce. Anyway, here's what we're going to do. We're going to break. I encourage you to, take a bio break or whatever. I don't know if there's any pizza left, but there's probably some beers over there. These 6 individuals are going to self-organize themselves into 3 pairs. It can be gender specific or gender neutral, I don't really care. But find a corner, for each of you, take a corner of maybe the room and then plant yourselves there. And you guys go up and talk with them and have some ad hoc conversation, and you can go until, I think we have to be out of here by 9 o'clock. There's not going to be we have no closing announcements that you need to make. That's it. That's great. Thanks for coming, and enjoy yourselves in conversation.